Hello, Sims. I hope you guys are prepared for Anis and her massive kit. I definitely did not rush out this on short notice due to Shift Up releasing her kit at the last minute. So let us begin, definitely not on short notice or on short on time. So with that out of the way, let's talk about her kit. So Anis is an electric coded Nikke that is a shotgun user and a burst tree supporter. Her first skill, Sparkling Boost, activates when entering full burst and affects all electric code allies. So these are two very important things to keep in mind. It's upon entering full burst, and it only affects electric code allies. She gives a massive 55% attack buff off the caster attack. This is very important. So she's giving it off her own attack and not off the receiving end attack for 10 seconds. And she also gives a reloading speed buff of 49% for 10 seconds. Her skill 2, Sparkling Missile, activates upon firing the last bullet. This will also be very important with her Synergies, so keep it in mind. It affects 2 enemies with the highest attacks and deals 382% of final attack as damage. So this final attack keyword means that overload gear, attack stats, and so on should apply to this skill. Unlike the previous one that doesn't specify it on skill 1, which probably is based off base attack. It also activates when firing the last bullet, a self buff that increases the damage to interruption parts for 6.9% for 10 seconds. Her burst skill, Sparkling Wave, is a 40-second cooldown burst, which is expected of burst 3 Nikkes, that gives a self buff that reduces her max ammo capacity by 73.9% for 10 seconds, increases her reload speed by 27.7% for 10 seconds, and increases her damage as strong element for 42.24% for 10 seconds. Okay, so should you pull for Anis besides the fact that she's a top tier waifu? The answer is yes. Okay. I'll give you guys a rundown, so let's go deeper into Anis. Well, you guys know what I mean, and I wouldn't mind doing it anyways. Let's go into the specifics, because the should you pull answer being yes is also dependent on whether or not you have electro-coded Nikkes. So, her first skill is packed with crazy steroids. Such crazy steroids that even Lance Armstrong would be salivating at the thought of them. She gives a 55% attack up buff that, even though it's based on her base attack, is still substantial, and a 49% reload buff that are not tied to her burst. For reference, yes, Maxwell gives a 43% attack buff tied to the Nikke on the receiving end, but Private also gives a reload buff of 51% speed, which are both not tied to the burst, but at the same time you're getting both packaged into a singular skill. This is a very powerful set of buffs, but it comes with a caveat. The caveat being that you need to be an electro-coded Nikke to receive this substantial buff that comes from her. So, currently there are 2 Nikkes that could make use of that massive piece of attack buff. Namely, it's mostly Virgil's Alcoholic Daughter and Chunibyo. They benefit greatly from attack and reload speed, both of them. Her second skill, for the sake of illustration, I will be putting a clip of Pepper using the last bullet mechanic as a shotgun Nikke, so that you guys can roughly visualize what I'm explaining. It's more of a selfish skill that allows to do extra damage and damage to interruption circles whenever she fires her final bullet. As her burst reduces her maximum ammo capacity for a ludicrous 73.9%, she will be able to use this incredibly frequently, especially if you pair her with Nikkes like Private and Admi, which kind of begs the question though, what would happen if you combine Private and Anis? It really begs the question because of how the game handles max ammo capacity and the reduction. Anis reduces ammo capacity by 73% and Private by 50%. So all of this adds up to more than 100%. I doubt the game will consider that Anis will have 0 bullets during the duration, although it would be hilarious as hell for it to happen, so I wouldn't even be mad if it happened. But the reality is it's very likely that it will be just like when you use Sakura Ludmilla with over 100% damage reduction on Train. It will be reduced to 1 bullet, just like there is 1 instance of damage on Train. Which, when combined with the ludicrous reload speed that you can get from both her buffs and Private buffs and even ADME buffs, you will be able to chain spam that second skill so quickly and do so much damage thanks to it that Anis is potentially a new member of the quote-unquote support club. You all know who I'm referring to. The damage to interruption circles is a nice bonus as a little tangent, but it's kind of like rate-up units. You never know if they're really in there when you consider the roll lock that we all have. Her burst skill is quite powerful as well, especially if she has advantage as strong element thanks to its powerful synergy with her damage-oriented S2, which makes for a truly quote-unquote support moment. Not much else to say about it, it's an incredibly powerful self-buff. Now, there is something to keep in mind that I repeat quite frequently on my streams about games like Nikke when it comes to judging supports. When you judge things like Summer Mary, when you judge things like Mast, is that supports, generally speaking, of course there are exceptions and there will be exceptions in the future probably, but are usually as good as what they are supporting. So what this means is that they also get better as more varied and suitable units to support are released, unless a different support takes over their niche. So while Anis already has great potential, her future self may be even better than this. Anis's synergies, just like the reason why she struggles finding new clothes, are pretty self-explanatory. She wants to support damage dealers that are of Electro element who benefit from her attack and reload buffs, while she herself enjoys being paired with Nikkes that increase her reload speed or decrease her maximum ammo capacity. Due to the limited roster of Nikkes when it comes to purely Electro coding, her greatest pairs are, of course, Scarlet and Guillotine. Beyond that, you could pair her with Mast for juicy crits and enabling the Berserker kits if you're going the Guillotine route, or even for Scarlet to some extent, although not as ideal. You could also pair her with reload speed Nikkes such as ADME, Private. And now, the reason why I don't mention Macro, Liv's Long Lost Sister, or Snow White is because, again, her buffs are oriented towards Electro units, so they wouldn't benefit from this as much as Electro-coded Nikkes would. If anything, they would lose out on a lot of value from slotting a different Nikke in Anis's place. For Burst 1, the options are rather limited, in the Electro department at least. So better synergies would be the usual suspects, namely FBI Bait Granny, Nikke's own Battle Mercy. Even if they don't benefit directly from the buffs that Anis provides, they benefit indirectly from the team that you're building around Anis. Namely, reload speed and ammo capacity down for Dorothy, and further buffing whatever Anis is already buffing in Leader's case, as well as providing cooldown reduction. Further options would be volume for her cooldown reduction as well, and crit buffs. They work quite well with Mast, especially if you're going for the infamous full Mast team. Now, Pepper is a very valid option as well. If you want both healing and build around the last bullet mechanic, she is a great option. She will not be benefiting from Anis's own buffs, but she will benefit again from the team that you're building around Anis and the last bullet mechanic and reload speed. Now, an honorable mention for Miranda, since she gives crit damage and attack buffs as well as a Burst 1 Nikke. I don't mention her in the main ones because you would be at times kind of stuck since she doesn't provide cooldown reduction and the like. She's still a very valid option, but she probably would be better off in different teams, especially if you have a Snow White and you're going to use that Snow White in Union Raid and the like. Due to the way Anis functions, the Burst 2 slots are quite few and in between. The biggest one would be the previously mentioned ADME and Mast. After that, it's mostly dependent what you have and what you want to fight. Novel for damage amplification, Guilty for raw damage and synergy with Pepper. You could even use a Senti for burst generation. you could run Dyalla for further cooldown reduction, Nihilister for pierce damage, but do note that none of them are Electro Nikkes except Mast. So they will not benefit from Anis's S1, but there are times where it's just better not to pigeonhole yourself into one specific synergy and just expand a little bit on what your roster is doing within your team. It is very important to note that I did not mention the Bunny Girls intentionally for a very simple reason. Due to the way her S2 functions, Anis does not want to be paired with Nikkes that increase ammo and reload ammo capacity, such as Noir or Diesel. If you're not running Noir, then running Blanc becomes a very terrible option, since she goes from being a 20-second burst 2 to a 60-second burst 2 without Noir. So when building a team, always keep this type of anti-synergy in mind. Otherwise, you would be reducing your Anis's potential and performance by doing so, unless you enjoy watching the world burn. Now, for Arena, just like her base form, she seems to have quite a bit of potential. Depending on the type of shotgun that she will be, her burst generation may vary, but overall, being a shotgun will be an advantage for certain team compositions. On top of that, her kit, through her S2, allows her to do damage even outside of her burst. So, as far as Arena synergies go, she has synergies with some Nikkes that have quite a bit of potential to shine in Arena. Such examples would be BDSM Neat and Gender Bent Al Pacino. Both are electro-coded and both benefit greatly from her buffs, although do keep in mind that Vito Corleone will not benefit from the attack buff for her burst, as it triggers upon entering full burst. If Nikke starts dying though, she will become a further menace for the opposing team. For those few of you who use the best the best wife ever, I swear I'm not being threatened to say this. She's the best waifu in the entire game. I'm definitely not being threatened. She has synergy with her as well. For further Arena synergies, it would be kind of a list of the usual suspects. Shotgun teams, private teams, any team that would benefit from having extra burst generation from a shotgun and the additional DPS, Jackal teams, you know the drill. As long as you keep in mind her last bullet mechanic, her synergies, and to some extent her anti-synergies, you will probably find a way to make her work within the meta of your own cluster. So this will be it for my summer Anis hot take. If you liked the video, please consider liking and commenting, as well as subscribing, as every bit counts in our journey towards the 1k subscriber milestone. With that out of the way, this was Aliene, and thanks for watching.